Pacers lose to the Bulls in Chicago thanks to another poor start defensively. What's going on to start games? Myles Turner also returns from injury. We'll talk about that. And the loss itself, breaking down the game. What can the Pacers do better going forward? We'll talk about all that and more on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today we have so much to get to as we discuss Pacers Bulls. Lots happened on Wednesday for the Pacers. They lose again in Chicago by 11 to the Bulls, and it was all thanks to the first half. Their defense to start this game, as it has been all season, was terrible. We'll talk about that in the second and third segments, but we're going to open with Myles Turner returns for the Pacers as expected when he went from out to questionable on the injury report. That's usually a good indicator of a player's health improving, and it was the case for Turner, who was able to play against the Bulls. So we'll talk about Turner's return, what went into that, how he looked, things like that, the team's game at large in Chicago, and then the first quarter struggles. Talk to Alex Caruso one-on-one after this game, and as a perimeter defender who's talented, I wanted to get his take on a lot of the stuff the Pacers were talking about in terms of their defensive struggles. Let's start with Myles' return, though, the big story from the day here in Chicago. I'm still in the United Center. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm in this very brick-wally room in the back of their media area. But Myles, we talked to him after the game. He said that he found out roughly this morning that he'd be able to go. He posted on his Instagram a video with the caption debut with the popcorn emoji. Right? I think he knew earlier in the day that he'd be good to go, despite them kind of saying, we'll kind of see. And he played in like shorter spurts when he was out there, right? He wasn't perfectly aligned with the starters, only played 24 minutes in this game. So they're going to kind of ease him back in with this ankle thing. It can be risky to rush guys out with ankle things pretty quickly. So I understand that completely from them. But it was his first game of the regular season, his first game that matters and is important since January 14th of last season. He missed the final 39 games for the Pacers to close out 2021-22. So we talked to him after the game. He said he had some soreness, there, but post-game, but he's fine. I imagine he'll be playing Friday on ESPN, a little bit bigger role as he grows back in and get some chemistry with this team. Because, he played in preseason, sure, but, think about preseason. Like, two of those games did not feature Tyrese Halliburton. They were tinkering with lineups, experimenting, learning sets. Like, it's just a different environment. So we'll talk about a lot of the context of his return, but it's still a different thing in terms of intensity. Preseason games, some people say they don't matter at all for those sort of reasons, right? It's not necessarily the most serious game the entire time. So, yes, he played in a game 12 days ago. It was his first regular season game. I would say statistically kind of what I expected, right? I did not expect him to be super involved or impactful on offense. I thought maybe he'd shoot a little better. He finished with 5.6 rebounds, 2 assists, and 4 blocks in 24 minutes, so about half the game. So had he played his normal load, you're looking at 7 points, 10 rebounds, and 5 blocks. About the typical Myles Turner game as expected. And I thought it was noteworthy that he called that out post-game. He said he hasn't played, quote, at this level, unquote, since January, right? Because in my head, I thought, he played 12 days ago and was playing about the minutes load he'll probably get in this game. I don't think it'll be like this huge drop-off for him. But also, first of all, you have to be careful coming back from injury. And then he clarified, when I followed up, that the preseason and regular season are way different in a way that it's not apples and oranges to calling that a return, right? So this was his true return. It was a little bit different of a kind of game. He said because of the game being different and being regular season and important, the game was kind of a little faster for him. His mind was a little fast, right? He said it'll take him some time to get the rhythm back, and I think you could see that kind of stuff, right? This is something that has been the case for Turner his whole career. When he's confident, when he feels like he's fitting in, when he knows what his teammates are going to do, he makes more decisions that make the offense flow a little better, make his own game flow a little better. He attacks the rim more. He's a more pressure-based offensive player instead of today a lot of swing it around, set some screens, and then cut into space kind of guy, which is fine. It's not like that's useless, but when he is fully confident and fully ingrained with the group, he plays better than this. He did not play particularly well on offense, right? 1 for 7 from the field, not necessarily in the right spaces all the time. Timing of cuts is off. A lot of stuff that will obviously get better as he continues to play and play. Again, first regular season game ever with Tyrese Halliburton and Buddy Hield and every single starter for the Pacers. That was Myles Turner's first time playing with them. So, yeah, I think a disappointing offensive game for sure. But context is important. That, again, his first game ever with all 4 of the other starters. But I did think it was interesting that, after playing in preseason 2 weeks ago, it's still a totally different thing for him in terms of a return kind of deal. He did say he found his groove in the third quarter a little bit, and so did the Pacers in general, right? They got smoked to start this game, but in the third, they really picked it up and looked like a useful team. In the third quarter, Turner was a +7 in that frame. The whole starting 5 did very well. He had a couple, really good consecutive possessions on the defensive end in the fourth quarter too. He had 3 blocks in the fourth quarter, 2 in consecutive possessions, right? In the second half, he clearly was a more forceful, impactful player who figured out where he can help this younger Pacers team. So clearly got more into it as the game went on, but some struggles offensively in his first action back with this team. So I felt like he was doing that thing where, like I said earlier, confidence was not all the way there. I understand why. It's his first game in months, regular season game in months. But that it takes away from what he can be as a player, right? It's just going through the motions sounds like it's harsher than I intend it to be, but it's he's making the here's how the possession continues pass instead of a here's how we can get an advantage or how I personally can get an advantage kind of thing. And this game's interesting for him because Vucevic, the Bulls starting center, who had a pretty solid game of his own accord. I have the fourth quarter box score up, not the full one, excuse me. Vucevic finished this game with 14 points and 7 rebounds, right? He played pretty well. But Turner's done well against Vucevic in his career. But the Bulls' backup center, Andre Drummond, who finished with 8 points and 13 rebounds, is someone that has kicked Turner's butt throughout his career, right? So some tough matchups, some easier for him, right? I thought maybe he could put some stronger stamp on the game. But he certainly looked like he was just in the swing it, keep the possession flowing, let the guards make decisions move instead of making some more decisions on his own, which is something I think he should be doing a few more times every game as especially when he's the lone center, right? When Smith is out, and Smith played pretty well in this game, or when Jackson's out, I think he should be doing that more often. I understand why he didn't, but I don't want to excuse it that I think he's better when he does swing it a little bit more, and I think he should try to force his involvement a little more. But his defense was at the standard level you expect, especially when considering that fourth quarter. And context all considered, I thought it was about the expected debut for Myles Turner. I think he'll play better as he gets more minutes, as he plays with these guys more often. Again, first real game, first time playing with every single member of the Pacers starting 5, but in general did lack some of the general force that the Pacers would have hoped they could get from him. I think he'll grow into those sort of things, though, with this team, as all the other young guys have, right? They clearly are already developing a little bit better chemistry throughout the season. Another big man that I've been dying to ask about and finally did before this game that's been injured all season, Daniel Tice. I know less people are interested in this than Myles Turner by a mile, but in preseason what we heard from the team was he's out because he's recovering from a grueling Eurobasket run, which went into September, right? That's the same month of training camp. Yeah, I hear that. That can be tough. Time zone change. He was sick right when he got here. I understand that. So Daniel Tice was not playing in preseason because of that. But then the season started, and he was on the injury report with right knee soreness. So then that was a more real, concrete injury that I wanted to know more about. So if you'll recall, going back to August, when Germany started pre-Eurobasket, when they were doing World Cup qualifiers, there was some stuff put out about Daniel Tice's status for Eurobasket being in question with an injury. Didn't say what the injury was. Well, it turns out that injury is the same knee that is now hurt. He did end up playing in Eurobasket, right? Played through that injury, but still a thing that was bugging him when the tournament ended. So it's kind of like a use thing or an overuse thing, right? He went straight from the finals to playing in that. So the Pacers realized that could be why he's having this knee soreness thing, and they're just keeping him out in sort of precaution of that. He's doing more and more. He's ramping up, Carlisle said, right? He was working with Myles Turner a little bit as they both rehab this week, he said. And Carlisle said he should be ready in the not too distant future. So Daniel Tice, even when he is back, I don't think he'll be in the rotation. But Myles Turner returned today. I wanted to provide all the injury updates in one segment. Tice could be on the horizon as another depth big, who, again, I don't think he'll play. He's like the 5th center alone on the depth chart for the Pacers, but since there wasn't a lot of clarity on that, I wanted to get the full picture cleared up. So Myles Turner is back, worth monitoring how he can improve and blend in with this team, because especially in the offensive end, I think there's some work from everybody to do to get him a little bit more integrated than 7 shots, making only one of them. But they were fine looks, right? Outside of one shot clock fadeaway three-pointer, I thought his three-point attempts were good looks. So just stuff that they can keep going to, but I think that will all get better as time goes on. Let's talk about the game at large, because there was more stuff in this game than just Myles Turner. The Pacers once again got their butt kicked in the first half. I want to talk about the entirety of the game. Before we do that, though, I want to talk to you guys about PrizePicks. You can take Luka Doncic to score more than 26.5 points, or LeBron to have more than 8.5 rebounds, or Kevin Durant to have less than a certain number of assists. All this is how PrizePicks works and how fun it can be. Their format is awesome. You just pick a player and a projection that they give you and decide, hey, is this guy going to have more in this stat or less than this stat? It's super easy to make entries. It's super simple, and that's what makes it so fun. And the other thing that makes it really fun as a daily fantasy alternative is that you're going against a computer and projections and not other people who can maybe do more research than you or have a better feel for certain things than you. This is just you versus a computer. So how PrizePicks works, you just pick 2 to 5 guys, and will they do more or less than their PrizePicks projection? You can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. No competing against other people, just you versus projections. They've got any sport you watch at the college and pro level, and you can make your entries in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. They have safe and fast withdrawals and are currently operational in 30 states and Canada. Download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com. Sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users get 100% instant match deposit. You put in 100, they give you 150, 50. You get the idea. Don't forget to use the promo code LOCKEDON to get that match deposit up to $100. Again, that code at PrizePicks is LOCKEDON. Try it out today. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen, Locked On Bulls, of course, hear their take on this game, what the Bulls were able to do so well to jump all over the Pacers to start this game. And let's transition into that. The game itself, and the Pacers once again, ridiculously atrocious start. Just completely horrible. This was the most points they've given up in a first quarter. It was 36 in the first game, 36 in the second, then 35, then 33 against Philly. And then in this game, it was 38 first quarter points for the Bulls. 38 points in the first quarter for Chicago. They shot 5 for 9 from deep. They hit all their free throws, and they also shot well from 2, 9 for 15. That's 60%. They dominated the glass. They only turned the ball over once. Essentially, they didn't have a lot of force put on them in the first quarter. The Pacers have, though, bounced back from poor first quarters basically the entire season, right? Against Detroit, the second quarter is where they took their first lead. Against the Spurs, they chipped into it and got the lead lower. Basically every game, again, except for the Sixers, they've done a good job of improving in the second quarter. That did not happen in this game. That did not happen at all against the Bulls. Second quarter, the Bulls scored, you guessed it, again, 38 points. They had 76 at halftime. 76. The Spurs ended up exceeding that halftime number, but they had choppier bits in the second quarter. Second quarter for the Bulls, 57% from deep. End up shooting 8 for 13 on 2-pointers, 10 for 11 from the foul line. They turned it over a little more, but they were still doing well on the glass, running, just being better. And the Pacers had no answers. Their start defensively was absolutely atrocious. Rick Carlisle said that they've got to decide they're going to start games better with more presence and disposition. And of course, the burning question is, how does this happen? And then they pick it up every game, right? In the second half, they only gave up 48 total points after conceding 76 in the first half. How can that happen? Clearly, something inside of them could make them defend better, and their scheme change could work. But why couldn't it happen to start the game? Everybody, coaching staff and players, those questions have to be answered. Because they looked horrible on defense to start this game, as they have every single game. The least they've given up in the first quarter is what they gave up against Philly, and I said 33 earlier so confidently. I hope that's accurate. I'm double-checking right now. It is. That's the least they've given up in a first quarter is 33. We'll talk about their first quarter defense in the final segment, because that's like the story of their season to me, right? They've played pretty well in the aggregate for every other quarter at most times this season. In the first quarter, truly atrocious defense, and they can't overcome it, even if they play well offensively for the rest of the game, right? Buddy Hield gives you a bunch of points. Tyrese Halliburton double-double. Mathurin picks it up after a slow start. Jalen Smith is sinking shots, right? Chris Duarte had a good first half. They had the offensive firepower they needed at times, but their defense was so bad, they only looked like they had a chance in this game for a very small amount of time. So to me, looking at the defense in the first quarter, it snowballs like this every time. They have a terrible closeout or just terrible perimeter containment, and someone drives past a pacer, and they get close to the rim. So then a rotation comes. Either a big comes or a wing or guard slides down to cut off the driver, and then someone else is open, right? The defense cannot get to that second guy, and the kickout has been there for wide open shots. That's why the Spurs shot well from three. That's why the Bulls shot well from three. That's why a lot of teams have shot well from three, because the kickouts have been there, and that extra rotation to that guy has not always been there. But you can't blame the extra rotation there, because go back through the steps. Guy driving is what caused all the defense to move and be out of place. They need to contain the perimeter better. And that's so simple to say, but just keeping their guy in front of them, do not lose that possession, would go a long way for them. And urgency is a big factor in that, right? When they have a fire lit under their butt, again, we'll talk about this in the next segment, they do better at this exact thing, but they can't do it too. So a horrible second quarter as well. They figured it out in the second half, but it didn't matter. It was way, way, way too late, because they were awesome in the second half, right? They won the second half against Philly. They won the second half against basically, I think, every team they've played this season, they've won the second half, right? 52-48 the second half in this game. Even despite a poor fourth quarter, they won the second half because they played better defense, and Buddy Hield was awesome. Awesome in the second half of this game. Buddy Hield finishes the second half 5 for 9 from the field, 4 for 6 from deep, 3 assists, 2 boards. He had 16 points, and they were plus 10 with him in the game. He was tremendous. They couldn't get him off the floor as they were coming back. They got the lead down to 4. It looked like they had a chance to come back in this game, but the second unit couldn't do anything, right? They came in with the bench group against the Bulls bench group to try to steal some minutes before getting the starters back in, and it just absolutely did not work at all. So really tough that the second unit couldn't. They've been pretty good this year, but they were not good in this game. Lots of struggles for basically all of them. But if the second unit could have done more there, and they went a little bigger, it was Terry Taylor's first minutes of the game. That could have changed things. That did not work out. Jalen Smith also fantastic in the comeback effort. Second half for Jalen Smith, 5 for 7 from the field, 3 out of 5 from deep, 7 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 blocks, 13 points, plus 18. Plus 18. He was marvelous. All the starters were a plus and the plus minus. The second unit was all minuses, and Terry Taylor, who played in the third quarter after not playing in the first half because they tried to go bigger. These 4 guards, smaller groups, or 3 guards and a wing, whatever you want to say, we're doing terrible. So they tried to go bigger with Terry Taylor. It also didn't work. He was minus 14 in the second half of this game alone. So tough to come back when you dig yourself a deep hole, because the Pacers' second half was certainly a build on it kind of performance. Their tweaks made sense, but it just didn't work. In that third quarter, meant no Mathurin in that quarter. I think that was the first quarter of the season. He didn't play at all, but he had a quieter impact himself in this game. He reached 15 points. It'll look fine in history when you look back on it, but 3 for 11 from the field. Most of his damage was done like he does at the free throw line. He got 2 points at the end. I actually asked him about it. He was, trying to score. It's like thinking from Benedict Mathurin's shoes. He's going against Dalen Terry, his teammate at Arizona, who was a first-round pick from the Bulls. Dalen Terry subbed in with about a minute to go in this game. That was the only minutes he played. They're only going to play against each other for the first time once ever. So Mathurin was clearly trying to score him. I think he took every shot for the final minute. And then he got a steal with the shot clock off at the end and still took it to the cup. Terry fouled him. Nikola Vucevic was unhappy with that, but Mathurin wanted, you only get that opportunity once. I get it. He finished with 15 points and 4 assists. It was the quietest game I think he's had, and that's why he didn't play in that third quarter, but that was still surprising to me. It seems like having him out there should be important all season. And, of course, Jalen Smith, like I said, I'm reading through my notes chronologically, had a wonderful game. Some guys on the flip side of nice games. Let's start with T.J. McConnell. Definitely after talking about him Monday night, definitely his worst game of the season. 11 and a half minutes, 0 for 5 from the field, just 2 assists and 1 block. That's his whole stat line. Couldn't get it going inside at all. The Bulls were certainly ready for him on his drives, minus 14 with him out there. Haliburton did much better running the show. They need more from McConnell offensively in these kind of games. And when you get nothing from both when you get nothing from both McConnell and Ben Mathurin, especially in the first half, your second unit cannot do anything, right? They could not get anything going. With that bench group, those 2 guys struggling was a big reason why they've got to get those guards going if they want to do well. Because the Bulls' second unit had a fantastic game, and that plays hand in hand. When you're pulling the ball out of the net over and over, it's harder to score, but McConnell needed to do a little more. Only Andrew Nembhard played an okay game for the second unit guards. No Goga, the casualty of Myles Turner's return. No Goga Bitadze. He did not play despite playing well in the Pacers' first 4 games. That makes the most sense, though. Of all the guys to be out of the rotation, he was the big, right? Jalen Smith played well and should play. Isaiah Jackson played well and should play. Myles is going to play. Goga was out. It looked like Terry Taylor was going to be out. Like I said, didn't play in the first half, but he was the 4 in the second half as they went a little bigger. So Goga is the casualty, and I think that the decision every game, or the decision for lineups and tweaks, will be between Andrew Nembhard at the 2, and then moving up Chris Duarte and Benedict Mather's position, or going with Terry Taylor and having those guys at the 2 and the 3. That seems like it will be the case. Chris Duarte, great first half, really rough second half, right? It looked like he was going to figure it out. At halftime, he was the only, he's 4 for 8, 2 for 4 from deep, +4. Their only positive plus-minus player at halftime, right? Remember that number, 12 points at halftime, because in the second half, Chris Duarte was over 3 with 0 points, right? So he finished with 12 after a really good start. I thought this was going to be his best game of the season, and it still might have been, but something he's got to work on. So a small subplot of the season that I'll probably do a segment on at some point is, every player, they've had few players be consistent through every game, right? You can tell, like Halliburton has been, I think, where he starts a little slower, then ramps it up once he understands the other team, and that's kind of it. Everybody else has been kind of all over the map in terms of what their impact can be on a game-to-game basis. Some guys have good first half, some guys have good second halves. Very few guys. I guess Aaron Nesmith's defense has been a constant, and he hit shots in this game. But in general, everybody's been all over the map with consistency, and that's been really killer for this team. So they've got to figure that out. And part of that starts on the defensive end. They've just got to defend better to start games. Like there's only so many times I can say this, and I feel bad. I even said that to Tyrese. I said, forgive me for asking again, but what can you guys do to start better on defense? I feel like we're asking this question over and over, but it keeps happening, so I have to keep asking about it. But they've got to defend better to open games if they want to win, and it just looks atrocious at the start of every game. And that will be the focus of our last segment. What is going on with the Pacers' first quarter defense? Let's talk about it. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen, I've suggested the show a lot, but the Blazers had a great start to the season. Damian Lillard, though, strains his calf against the Heat today. Locked On Blazers with Mike Richmond is the way to go to get more on the Blazers, the spunky, hot Blazers. Let's talk about the Pacers' first quarter defense, and I'm going to lead with a number that sounds fake and is not. Through 5 games, the Pacers' defensive rating in first quarters is 138. 138. I mean, that is like unbelievably bad to me. It almost sounds fake to say, because the second worst defense in the first quarter by any team is 126. It's like they're 12 points worse, and that is the Bulls, ironically, who they played today. 12 points worse than the next worst team in first quarters. It's just awful. They can't stop anybody to start games. That number is enormous. Like, just switching to the third quarter, where they have a little more force and play better, their defensive rating in third quarters is 107.1. That's 12th in the league, right? Clearly something clicks and changes for them in the second half. You could say the same thing about fourth quarters, where they've defended a little bit better than the rest of the games. 19th in fourth quarter defense, right? They just have to start games better defensively if they want to win. And the stats bear it out perfectly, which makes sense because we can watch it happen. So I wanted to get some context on this because Rick Carlisle said, there's some strategies to this, obviously, but there's also some mental side of it that, like, he can prepare the players all he wants and change the game plan and things, but they've got to come out with more fire. And so I wanted to talk to Alex Caruso, who is an excellent defensive player, about what it takes to start playing better on defense and things like that. So I just said, what does it take for you to do it? And he said a lot of defense is just pride and competitiveness and a care factor, right? He said he's trying to win each play. So that's something the Pacers need to learn and take, right? They need to try to win each play and have pride and competitiveness. And that sounds so simple, but when you're giving up 138 points per 100 possessions in a quarter, that's not happening, right? And so he said, I asked him specifically, what were the Bulls doing to pick apart the Pacers defense? They had 76 points in the first half. He said good ball movement and player movement was key for the Bulls in crushing the Pacers, because go back to the second segment, right? You move the ball, and all of a sudden you're attacking a closeout, or all of a sudden you're attacking a rotating defense. They can get in the paint and boom, cause that chain reaction I talked about earlier, where someone has to rotate over and then the weak side's open and then a three is right there. The Pacers too aggressive or too high up on these perimeter defenders. They need to sag off a little bit more so they can stay with them on the drives. And Caruso says it's about knowing yourself and for to know where to be and how far you can go at a defender when you're closing out and things like that. And he said it's a young learning team, that sort of thing will happen for a young and learning team, but also they have young fast legs. They should in theory be better at these things, right? So the starts are poor, and it's a lot of mental. It's a lot of you just gotta effing do it sometimes, right? So the Pacers starts have just been unbelievably bad, like insurmountably bad. I asked Tyrese about it again, and I already said, that the context of the question and stuff like that, but he says, I don't know, we've got to figure it out. They absolutely do. He himself is one of the guys that is getting beat quite a bit off the dribble. He and Buddy Hield, I think, are the biggest two culprits, but not the only ones. I think everybody is to some extent. Sometimes I feel stupid asking those kind of questions, right? Because if Tyrese Halliburton knew what the Pacers had to do to fix their first quarter woes, he would say it, and then they would do it. But they don't know 100% what it takes to lock in differently or to defend better. And last year, remember, this is like they were horrible in third quarters, right? It changes by year. It's very strange. So they've got to lock in better, especially when in this third quarter and second half, they've proven that with a fire under their butt and with some tweaks, and after seeing what the other team is doing so well, and after evaluating, that's something this team is pretty good at, actually. They have a really good coaching staff for adjustments. They do so much better, right? Like I said, one of the almost top 10 teams in the league in third quarter defense, middle-ish of the league in fourth quarter defense. They just have to do that the whole game because their offense is good. They just aren't doing that at all. It's truly terrible. And they just don't look connected, right? In the preseason, that was something that impressed me. In Charlotte against the Knicks, when they only gave up 100, they looked connected. Through 3 quarters against the Pistons, they looked connected. 2 quarters against the Bulls tonight, they look connected. They're rotating together. They're not allowing as much penetration. They just like a more threatening team. And it's like they're not ready when they're not connected. That's on everyone, right? There is an element of don't get beat. That is the crux of the problem to me. Guys are getting beat too much. But at the same time, one guy rotates, and then someone else has to rotate to the backside, and then someone else rotates to that guy's man. It's a chain reaction that when you watch playoff basketball or finals basketball, teams that are really dialed in defensively and on the same page are really good at that rotation. There's very few mental lapses. There's very few guys slipping open somehow inexplicably because they're dialed into those rotations. Now, I'm not expecting the Pacers to play like a playoff or finals team on defense. In fact, they'll probably be one of the worst defensive teams in the league this season. But there is an element to this of improvement that can come. And there's only so much they can say. We view it as this sort of problem without fixing it because they have to find a way, to change their approach to games, what they do on game day, if they're going to be playing this bad. You have to change your routine in a way that can allow you to focus or be dialed in. It's just such a fascinating trend because they have a blueprint. They show it where they defend better for this quarter and this stretch with these players, and it's not even always the same guys. So it's clearly something about everybody in this team in general, and the coaching staff is, of course, a factor in this as well. Like their adjustments matter in this and all that. And preparing a team for a game is the job of a coaching staff, right? So everybody's involved in improving this. And it's just such a fascinating trend. And clearly, again, like I said, they can fix it, right? They make comebacks seemingly every game to some extent. They make it a 4-point game against the Bulls, right? They were close with the Sixers at times. They obviously beat the Pistons. They had a shot to tie it in both of their first 2 losses, right? They've made the comebacks every game except for kind of the Sixers, right? They know how to do it. They know how to succeed. They just don't. They just don't to start games. And they have to flip that switch, and that's on everyone in terms of prep. That's on everyone to evaluate how to get ready for a game and be ready to not lose a possession, to do what Caruso said and come out there and say, I'm going to get stops and things like that. But it's also on schematic changes, right? So there's a lot that goes into this, but it's been so bad that I wanted to talk about it. It's been such a theme for the Pacers season that I want to talk about it, and we'll see where it goes. But they look really awful to start games on the defensive end, and they're all searching for answers, right? They are all talking about it in a way that's kind of like, we've got to figure it out. So we'll see if they can or not. They've got a chance on Friday on ESPN against the Wizards and then against the Nets twice, who will run all over them if they do not figure out those defensive issues, because the Brooklyn Nets can certainly score. Tomorrow, of course, Friday of this week, we'll be talking some Wizards, which I think is good for a young team to have the same opponent twice early in the season for adjustments, and then they play the Nets twice in a row. So another opportunity for that sort of thing. We'll be talking with one of the Locked On Nets hosts, because the Nets not only are good and talented, but one, they went through a sort of rebuild kind of recently after the Darren Williams, Paul Pierce era. I want to talk about rebuilding with that host, and as well Edmund Sumner and TJ Warren are on the Nets, so we can catch up with those guys and their time in Brooklyn. You won't want to miss that. Till then, everybody have a great day. See you tomorrow.